Hey, thanks for downloading the Vanguard Battle project file. In this crash course, my goal for the next 20 minutes is to get you up and running and creating films and renders out of Unreal Engine. So let's get started. In the off chance you don't have Unreal Engine installed, all you have to do is download the Epic Games Launcher. There's an Unreal tab when you open that up, and then just go into the Library tab and add in an engine version that you want to install. The best one to install, what we're using here, is Unreal Engine 5.2. So first step, let's open our Saber Battle U project file, and now you'll see our project file is loading. If this is your first time opening it, be prepared. It's gonna take a long time to compile the shaders for this project. Now, shaders is just another term for materials. Shaders is more commonly used in video games. Materials is commonly used in VFX. But Unreal just has to pre-compute all of the materials so that we can view everything in real time, and that's what's happening here. So when you first open this up, you'll see all this chaos of different particle effects and icons going on. So the first thing we can do is just right-click inside of our viewport to start moving and panning our camera. And when that's set, we can press the G key just to disable any of those icons and make our viewport a little bit clearer. But if we want to preview our sequence right away, all we have to do is press on this play button. And this will play our timeline for our final shot right here live in the viewport. And notice here, every time we play, we'll get a different physics simulation for our drones as they slam into the ground. Now let's press stop or the escape key to stop our simulation. And if we want to scrub through that timeline that we just saw, go to your content browser. Sometimes when you're first starting Unreal, you'll find this from hitting Control and space, but I like to dock this in my layout, so there's always a content browser. And then press on Level Sequence, Vanguard, Clash, Final. And if we press on this little camera icon in this camera cuts track, now we can scrub through our scene and press play to view our shot in Sequencer. Now, a really important thing to know here when using Unreal for visual effects is that you need to press on this little magnet icon. This enables snapping, and this means that we're snapping our playhead, our time indicator here that I'm scrubbing around, it's snapping it to a whole frame. If I press on the plus key inside of Sequencer to zoom in on the timeline, otherwise you can drag on the bar here. If I disable snapping, you'll see that I can actually drag in between frames. And even though this can look kind of cool in the viewport where it's super slow motion, if we set up keyframes in between the whole frames, then it's gonna mess up our renders. And speaking of renders, rendering is really easy in this project. All you have to do is press on this clapper board inside of Sequencer, and this will automatically add your sequencer as a job in the movie render queue. All we have to do is click on this down arrow and select our preset here to make a Playblast QuickTime. This is gonna make a QuickTime movie file for our project, and all we have to do is press on Render Local. If this is your first time rendering out, you're gonna have to wait for your shaders to compile one more time. And yes, this is really annoying, but you only have to do it once and you'll never have to do it again. And now we can see our render as it's going here. And at the end of the sequence, it's gonna take all of these single frames and combine it into a QuickTime movie file. Now to view that, we can click on this output path, so just click directly there, and now you'll see all of our different renders, and with each new render, it'll version up properly, thanks to this preset. Now to view these, you'll want to view them through the QuickTime player to make sure you're previewing the right color, but these should match one-to-one with your viewport when you drag this clip into your editing software. But from here, we can start moving around our viewport and framing up on different shots. So to navigate around the viewport easily, all you have to do is right click inside of the viewport to move around, then use the WASD keys to navigate. Then you can use the Q and E keys to crane up or down. And then you can also use this Z and C keys to zoom out or zoom in. Now these will go away as soon as you finish pressing right click, but you can realize, hey, we need to zoom in more on our camera when we go inside of Sequencer. Now I've included this final shot so you can reference back to this and see exactly how it's built and how all of these pieces should fit together. You'll notice that it's really easy for us to scrub back and forth in this timeline, and our Niagara particle effects snap to the correct frame, but this is not their default behavior, and a lot of times this can get people off track because you have to enable some particular settings when you're adding Niagara particle effects into your timeline. Now, if you want to grab some of the effects presets, just go to the Saber Battle and then Effects folder, And for example, let's grab this Saber Impact Laser Niagara system. And Niagara systems are in this cyan color as of Unreal 5.2. And you'll see that this just starts looping live in our scene. And it's kind of cool because it interacts and bounces around and has proper physics with all of the objects in our scene. But we want to be able to lock this to a certain frame range in our scene so that we'll get the same render result every single time. To set this up correctly, let's add an impact and update the timing of our new particle system to match the impact of this saber slicing through the vanguard. So first off, let's get this in the right position. So we'll grab the move tool and grab on the X and Y axes here until we get them close to our vanguard warrior. And I'm just constantly toggling the icons on and off by pressing the G key. And a lot of times you can tell exactly where it is because the icons will intersect with geometry. So now I can tell, okay, that's lined up right around his back. And then we can also rotate it into the right direction. Now let's scrub forward in our timeline to make sure that it's lined up correctly. And now we can line it up slightly better here. And once we like that position, all we have to do is grab this Niagara particle system from our outliner and just drag it into our sequencer timeline. And now you can see that this Saber Impact Laser 3 appears inside of Sequencer. Now to add in properties and keyframes, we need to add in a track first. So a kind of confusing thing here, if you're just starting out, is you would think that you could just add any property from this particle system right away, but we actually have to add in this Niagara component. And now when we add a track from the Niagara component, we have all of our different Niagara settings that we can keyframe and animate inside of Sequencer. Now, the one that's most important to us is going to be this Niagara system lifecycle track. Now, this lifecycle will let us offset the timing of this particle system forwards and backwards if we set it up the right way. So just right click on a lifecycle and then set the age update mode to desired age. Now, this is that one magic setting. And now I can drag this system lifecycle back and forth and offset the frame range of my Niagara particle system. This makes it really easy for us to step forward through Sequencer. So I'm just gonna press the left and right arrow keys to go back and forth a few frames and see that on frame 74 is when we're slicing through. So we need to change our first frame here to frame 74. And sometimes it helps to put it one frame before. And now we can see that our particles show up, the little highlighted particles there, and they shoot towards the camera to give our shot even more depth. And now when we play, we can see this particle system and simulation that's repeated every single time. So drag and drop these different Niagara effects into your scene, from blowing dust to lightsaber impacts and explosions. They're all here. And all you have to do is add them into Sequencer. Now to get started on your own project, you can navigate to the Saber Battle project file and then click on ML Vanguard Clash Tutorial Start Here. So otherwise just type in Start Here and it's the only thing that will pop up. But we'll click on this level and open this up. And now we'll see we have our two Vanguard warriors in our environment. Now I've removed a lot of the effects at first, so it's really easy to see because we're taking advantage of this levels menu here. So if you don't see this, it's just under the Windows and Levels tab. And this is just one way to organize our actors in our outliner even further, because we can enable and disable different actors inside of our scene. And that's exactly what I've done with our effects level here. Now think of levels as just a group of different actors in your scene. So we have geometry, lighting, and animation actors. So just pick the most relevant and double click on whatever level you want to add actors into that group. And to preview your sequence, you can start working out of the sequences folder. So just open up Saber Battle Sequences and open up this Vanguard Clash Tutorial Start. And this camera won't look too good at first, but it's just a placeholder for you to start adding in animations onto your different characters. So in this sequence, just select any of your Vanguard characters and add in a new animation track. And you'll see we have all of these existing animations courtesy of Mixamo.com. And we can add in different sword and shield attacks onto our characters. So do that to start blocking out your different animations. And then once you're happy with your animation, you can start toggling on your effects layers and start adding in dynamic effects into your scene, as well as adding different lights into the lighting level. Now, a good way to stay organized when using levels is once you have this effects layer selected, I can go back into my outliner, press on this little cog wheel here, and only show actors in the current level. Now, this will only show me the effects actors in my outliner, and this makes it a lot easier to be organized and see what's going on inside of this scene. So if you look at our drone here, this is set up by having two muzzle tracers parented to a flying mesh, but this will interact with the world properly. So the collisions are set up inside of this Niagara particle system so that you can move this around and it'll interact correctly and even shoot some lights through our scene. If I jump into simulate mode, I can see these drone swarms in the background, which will circle around and spread out over time. The longer that this sequence goes, the further out the drones will go. So once you have your life cycle set up, you can use this to drag and drop different sections of these drone swarms to make cool shapes in your compositions. And then we have a lot of ground dust that you can quickly duplicate throughout your scene and will correctly interact with all of the explosions and different lights and impacts that our Niagara effects are creating. And you can see by just duplicating 5 or 6 there, we get some really nice subtle atmosphere going through our scene that interacts when we have these explosions. And lastly, we have our saber impacts, which are just sparks with collisions, and they'll also add some dynamic light into the scene. Now for lighting, we've kept it super simple, so let's double click on our lighting level and then go back to our outliner. This was made using the environment light mixer. So if you go to window, environment light mixer, this is where you can add in a sunlight, skylight, and sky atmosphere to correctly set up your scene. But if you want to change the sunlight, all you have to do is go to the directional light here. And if you change the Y pitch, that will change the time of day the most. So by default, it's set to -5, but I could set this to -1 and have it set even darker, like we're close to dawn. And that'll correctly update across our entire environment. Now we also have exponential height fog, which a lot of people end up using this fog density to make a difference. But one pro tip that I've found that you might like is actually changing the height of your exponential height fog actor. This changes how fog is added into the scene. And if you drag it really high up, you can get some really interesting looking results. And right now we have volumetric fog set up, so we'll even get some cast volumetric shadows if you want to add in a dust storm element into your scene. You can also tweak the clouds by going into the volumetric cloud actor and messing with these first 3 sliders. They'll have the biggest impact on your cloudscape. And this is all using Unreal's default sky system. And then to add in lights, you can just add in rectangle lights overhead to mimic soft boxes that you might find on a film set, and push these off screen and above our actors to get some really interesting top light to add dynamic shape across our scene. And then from here, you can change the light color, bring in our color picker, and just nudge this color towards our orange sky until it looks natural. Another thing you can do is add animation to lights. So we have him slicing through his stomach here, but what if we added an additional light for more impact? All we'd have to do is go to the quick add actors menu, grab a point light, and just drag it somewhere touching this object, and something like that could be pretty dynamic. And then all we have to do is change that light color to something more orange to match the color contrast in our scene. And then it's really easy to start creating keyframes. In this case, we don't even have to add it into Sequencer. We can just press on this add keyframe button here. And now when we select that point light, it'll automatically scroll to that object inside of Sequencer. And we can see that they've created a keyframe on frame 76. Now on frame 72, let's set the intensity to 0. And as long as we have this auto keyframe button enabled, it'll create a keyframe here. And now we have him slicing through. And then at the end, let's fade this off back down to 0. And now we can see it animating on and off. And a lot of times it's just simple tricks like this done right that can really start to elevate your scenes. And again, just as a reminder, all we have to do is play our selected viewport to see exactly what our render result is going to be when we render it out of Movie Render Queue. If your machine isn't that powerful, a very important tip to know, if you click on the little hamburger menu up here, sometimes you'll have to disable this real-time override, but that will let you toggle real-time on and off. And you can just think of this as rendering. Right now, if it's checked on, that means we're rendering the scene every single frame when Unreal is open, whether you're looking at it or not, whether you're in the bathroom or you're just watching YouTube tutorials on another monitor. You're rendering your viewport every single frame, and this can start to tax your machine quite a bit if you're not actively using Unreal and the Unreal viewport. So turn this off if you don't need it. That means it will not render, quality will go down as you're going through, and when you play back in sequencer, your scene's gonna do some really weird stuff. So if it starts glitching out and doing some unexpected things, it's probably because you checked real time off, but that's a good thing. You only wanna render when you need to. Now, the last thing we should talk about is our camera. How can we set this up in the best way? How can we add autofocus and even have the camera aim at our actors? So let's do that right now. So if we go into our Cine Camera actor and you scroll down here, we'll want to find the focus settings so we can set up our autofocus. So to do this, we want to change our focus method to tracking. And then the actor to track, we can use this pick actor icon and just select whatever actor we want. Now we can preview our focus plane by pressing on the draw debug focus plane, and this will create a purple plane showing exactly how far we're autofocusing in our scene. But when we scrub back and forth, you can see that it actually doesn't really stick to the actor. And this can be a little bit confusing at first. At least we know that the focus is working, but clearly it's not sticking to our actor. And the reason why is that this is actually focusing on the pivot point of the actors. The autofocus will always be set to the pivot point. So to fix this, there's a really simple fix actually. All we're gonna do is pop into the animation level here, and then we're gonna add in an empty actor. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna right click on this actor and move it into our character folder. So now this actor, I'm gonna rename it by pressing F2. I'm gonna call this a focus actor. And then what I'm gonna do is just drag and drop this onto our Vanguard blueprint. And from here, if we do this, we can select what bone in the rig we wanna parent this focus actor to the head of our warrior. And then lastly, once that actor is parented, let's reset our transform and we'll see that it'll snap to the bone position of the head. Now you can probably see where this is going. Instead of tracking on the Vanguard blueprint, let's track the focus actor. So I'm just gonna click here and type in focus actor. And now our purple plane is perfectly lined up with our character. Now lastly, let's talk about aiming our camera at our actor. So I'm just gonna delete all of the transform data here and show you how we can do this completely from scratch. So I'm gonna take our Cine Camera actor. Let's add in a new transformation track, but now we can create some new keyframes. So we just have our first keyframe here, but a really fun way to plot out your keyframes is to pilot your camera. So an important distinction here, there's these two camera icons. We've already used the camera icon next to the camera cuts track. And now if you right click in the viewport, you'll see that we can't move our camera. But if we pilot the camera, not the camera cut, this way we can actually move our viewport around, and if we have auto keyframe set up, it'll start creating keyframes for our location and rotation settings. So now it's really easy to scrub through the timeline here and start to reframe our camera, and it'll automatically keyframe between the two animations. So at least this way we can block out a camera really quickly, and then you can go in to start refining your keyframes by dragging them around, moving them left and right by hitting Control and left, right to nudge keyframes left and right, and also by using the curve editor to refine the shape and animation of your different keyframes. I know we just went through a lot, but that truly was a crash course. So hopefully this gets you up and running using this project file. Try out different animations, effects, and lighting scenarios by using fog and lights in interesting ways and changing the time of day and the light direction completely, and start opening up the different Niagara particle systems to see how they're built. So if you want to use some of these techniques but you struggled learning Unreal in the past, then you might like our Unreal Fundamentals course. We'll break down all the workflows of what you need to know, creating movies with characters, adding animation and sequencer, and rendering it out through Movie Render Queue. We go step by step through creating 4 different environments and teach you all the techniques and workflows that you need to know along the way so you can start creating environments on your own. Covering all the different subjects like lighting, effects, creating assets inside of Unreal, working with characters, and rendering out sequences with AOVs and compositing them inside of New to create VFX shots and films. And we have a lot of great bonuses like our materials cheat sheet, blueprints for beginners, and we have 5 Niagara templates that you can build on top of to create visual effects like impacts and explosions and add them into your scenes. So if that sounds helpful, go to unrealforvfx.com/fundamentals to join, whether you're a beginner or you're an industry pro trying to transition into using Unreal 5 for real-time visual effects and filmmaking. So go to unrealforvfx.com/fundamentals and get started today.